Hey, I'm Alistair, you're watching the first ever episode of Comic Book Wednesdays, so let's talk about comics. First thing I want to talk about is DC Comics. They're one of the largest, most successful comic book publishers in the world. Folks that publish Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Green Lantern and Aquaman announced earlier this month that they were rebooting their entire series. They're going to renumber 52 of their existing titles back to number 1. That'll be starting with Justice League number 1 on August 31st and the rest to follow in the next month. This is basically a total reboot of the entire series. They're wiping the slate clean and starting again from scratch. A lot of DC's loyal long-term fans who are in love with the history behind these characters are in an outrage over this. They feel like DC have pretty much abandoned them. Me personally, I kind of sit in the fence with this one. There's a greater interest in superheroes and comic books than ever before. I'm fairly confident that at this point, most people under 40 would be able to tell you roughly who Bruce Wayne is and how he became Batman. But I'm also quite aware that a lot of people find it quite difficult to get into comic books. It can be pretty intimidating to know where to start. I think this reboot will be a good chance for new readers to get a total reintroduction to these main characters. I think as well, if you look at how well Marvel are doing with their big events like Civil War and the death of Captain America, it's quite tempting for DC to pull something like this to try and bring in all the new readers. But on the other hand, DC characters do have this massive, sometimes 70-year history behind them, and it would be kind of a shame to lose that. I'm fairly sure DC don't actually want to upset their loyal fans, and I know a couple of loyal fans who are genuinely excited to see what they do with this. And all the classic comic books are still going to be there. You're still going to be able to go back and look over it. Yes, I am slightly nervous that they'll screw it up and they'll miss out something that I absolutely loved from the stories before. But I think when you remember that the writers for the comic books are actually comic book fans themselves, it actually just makes it more interesting than worrying what they're going to do with the new series. In the end, I think the DC reboot's going to result in new comic book readers, and I'm always in favour of getting more people to read comic books. With that out of the way, let's talk about comics. Since it's my first ever show, I'm going to go with a classic DC title, Batman Year One. I chose this comic for my first show because it's the one that I always recommend or lend to people who are wanting to get into comic books. In my opinion, the best Batman graphic novel of all time. It was written by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. It first appeared in 1987 in Batman issues 404 to 407. So a spoiler-free review of the storyline. Year One tells the story of Bruce Wayne's early career as Batman as he returns to Gotham City after 12 years training abroad. The thing that really struck me about the storyline is how much of it is given over to telling the story of Jim Gordon. While Bruce Wayne is returning to Gotham, Jim Gordon is moving there for the first time and he's starting a new life. A lot of the story focuses on how he copes with the corruption in the police department and the city as a whole. I don't want to go any further into the plot because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, so I'm just going to say that the storyline is great. It's dark and it's a reintroduction to the Batman that we take for granted now, but back then was groundbreaking. Looking at the artwork, it might be considered too classic for some people who are used to the bright, vibrant, hyper detail that we see in comic books now. In my opinion, the simple and powerful artwork that we see in the comic perfectly complements the story. It's full of dark, muted tones that give the comic a gritty and murky feel. Another thing you'll probably notice is that one colour tends to dominate each series of panels. This tends to give each separate scene its own feel. It makes each scene more engaging and makes the transitions between scenes so much more tangible. This is perfect for a story like this where you're following the plots of multiple characters. Year One really does deserve all of the accolades it gets. It is a masterpiece. It serves as the perfect reintroduction of Batman and is a brilliant choice for anyone looking for a place to start. And that's it for the first ever Comic Book Wednesday. Feel free to comment and let me know what you think. Give me a boost for supporting the DC reboot. Let me know what you think of Batman Year One and let me know what you think I should review next. I will see you next Wednesday. I hope you have a good week.